Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have Thalisse Reverent Medium, a black-white token deck. Before we get too far into it, as I mentioned in my previous video, I was recently on an episode of MTG Mudsta. So if you would like to watch me play my black-white Eiley deck, there will be a link in the description down below. I'll probably leave that link in the next few videos, just in case anyone wants to see it, as I think it's a very fun game, and Eiley is a deck that I have, made a video about, so that can be fun. Coming back to Thalisse, this deck comes to us from Macy, who says that they really need more consistency with the deck. They've added more draw recently, but that hasn't seemed to help. Finding a balance with token creators, ramp, draw, and buff spells is ultimately the goal. And they specify their goal is to use tokens to take out their opponents and not rely on aristocrats' strategies, which, though it breaks my heart, is probably a good deck building exercise for me to not just constantly build aristocrats decks. As for budget, they said preferably no cards that are over $30+, but if there's anything that they should be looking for, to mention it so they can plan long term. I don't think I have too many of those. I am generally a cheaper deck building person, but we'll see what the numbers add up to. So, before we finally get right into it, it's a good reminder that if you would like a video made on your own Commander deck, there is a link down below that you can fill out a form. And if you want your deck to be the next video I make, there is a link down there as well. Finally, there is a link for the deck list of this deck in the description down below. Man, there's so many things in the description these days, but the deck list is there as well, and so you can take a look for yourself. Okay, all that out of the way, let's take a look at our commander and see why they're the leader of our black-white token deck. Thalisse is 5 mana in black-white colors. She's a 3/4 human cleric with 1 ability, and that ability is at the beginning of each end step, create X/1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. Now this is very notable because it is not just on your turn. Usually these abilities are somewhat relegated to your own turn, kind of capping out the potential that you can get out of them. However, Thalisse says at the end of any turn, which is really, really nice. So you can cast things on opponent's turns, or you can get triggers on your opponent's turns, which is pretty good. But her main kind of function is that she's a token doubler. Now, this kind of commander is one that you don't need to rush to put her out. She's someone that comes out later in the game when you have your engines going, when you have your token generation going, and so that you can throw her out and just start doubling the number of tokens you get. Notably, she makes flying spirit tokens, which are, I think, arguably the best token you generally can make for like bang for your buck, if you'd like, or anything like that. Because generally better tokens, like I'm thinking angel tokens and things like that, 4/4s with flyer, are more expensive. But 1/1 flyers, they come with evasion, and you can probably get a lot of them for the mana you put into. So I do really like that. Now, we're going to go straight into the deck because there's not much else to really talk about her. And I think the deck is at a good start. I feel like a lot of decks I see these days have 36 lands. And I don't know if we should be adding to that a little bit, I feel like, with a 5 mana commander. But the deck itself is pretty straightforward. I think its biggest thing is that the curve is a little clumsy. We have a lot of high mana cards, and we have a few cards that we really want to see at very high mana, like these X spells that we want to pump a lot of mana into. So this deck is a little mana hungry. However, with that in mind, as Macy was saying, there is some things to think about the, let's say, the mana generation and the mana reliability of the deck, which I think is interesting because it feels like I feel like this deck is kind of a little bit all over the place, where it has some really, really strong cards, and then some cards that are I find a little weaker or a little less on point. And I think the easiest way we're going to do this is we're just going to go through the deck really, really quickly to see what outliers I can see that I think don't really belong here. Usually we would go into the 5 mana, the mana that is with our commander first to take a look through, but I don't actually think that's necessary as our commander, as mentioned before, is not, we don't need her out for our deck to function. She's basically, you know, something that doubles the power of our deck, but doesn't necessarily need to be out there while we're playing. So I'm not too worried about the cards that kind of conflict with her mana cost. So looking at our Planeswalkers, I think these are fine. I'm pretty happy with both of them. Sveshsat creates 2 tokens at a time, and that is card draw. Elspeth creates 3 tokens at a time and has a very powerful everything. She's just a very, very powerful card. So both of those, very, very strong. Lotho's fantastic, a nice, powerful card that creates tokens all throughout turns. Adeline is pretty good. Commissioner Severina Rain, when she attacks. So I find this card a little confusing in this deck. I mean, I get why she's strong, but it feels like, I feel like her, because I don't really like, I don't really like this card in general, because it feels like it's doing 2 impressions of cards that I'd rather have separately. On the second hand, the 2 mana sacrifice another creature, gain 2 life, and draw a card. Usually you can get this ability for less mana cost to play and less mana cost to activate. 2 mana and sacrifice a creature to draw a card is not that good of a deal. And then the other ability is when she attacks, each opponent loses life for each attacking creature. It's something close to what we have here, Harsh Sustenance. And I believe there is another one of those. Let me see if I can find it. Let's find, let's see. Let's say lose life each creature and see if we can find something here. Because I'm pretty sure there's one at a much lower mana cost, but I don't know if it hits all opponents. I should have checked how many of these cards before I just started scrolling. Let's see, this says there is 150, okay. I believe it was 1 mana where an opponent loses life for each creature you control from Tarkir, but I could be wrong. Let's see. Maybe we're just gonna let that go. Okay, maybe I'll look into that a little later. Kind of upsetting, but I feel like, going back to this, I really do like Harsh Sustenance here, where you drain a player for each creature you control. And Severina does an impression of that, but worse in, Severina. She does a worse impression of that, because the first thing is, although she hits all opponents, it has to be attacking creatures. So you can't have any of your tokens on defense. Every token that can attack needs to attack. And you want to attack with even non-token creatures, because each attack is 3 damage you're doing total. And something you might note is that our commissioner is 2 power and 2 toughness. So I think she can only really do this attack once. If she was the commander, I think I'd be a little easier on her, but as just a random card you're going to play and get 1 attack in, I don't love her that much. We don't even have a haste enabler with Lightning Greaves, so we can't play her, immediately equip, and attack. So overall, I think she's just kind of clumsy. Guardian of Faith, I think it's fine. I think we have better versions of this ability, and I'm going to be suggesting one myself. There's one that I believe also populates. You might be already playing that one. And you have Flawless Maneuver. I think it's a little unnecessary to also have Guardian of Faith. I think this is too defensive. There's a lot of boards where this just doesn't do anything, and I don't particularly like that. So with that in mind, I think that's an easy cut. Coming down a little more, let's see. Jazal Goldmane feels like a very expensive finisher. Don't get me wrong, I feel like he is very strong. He's a fine attacker. A 4/4 first strike is fine. But if 4 mana to not actually support your plan, whereas instead you have something like Moonshaker Cavalry, which does that but better, right? I don't really like Jazal here. I think we could cut that for sure. Then coming over here, there's a few of the higher mana cards that catch my eye. Maw of the Obsidat is, you say you don't want an aristocrat strategy, then I don't recommend playing this card because you want to be able to be taking advantage of the death triggers as well as growing the rest of your board. Otherwise, this is kind of a clumsy card. The fact that he's easy to remove, and also like you have to do a lot of math to understand this card, to understand how many it's worth sacrificing to get the most damage out. I don't like that kind of math. Maybe you do, but I'm not a big fan of it. Also, this card is excessively grim. This is not a point against it. It's just something worth considering, that when you look at the text, look at the flavor, look at the art of the guy kicking the people into it. Like, this is such a horrifying card, and probably a pretty good representation of capitalism, if you ask me. But otherwise, I think it's a really cool card, but I just don't think it belongs here. 5 mana is a lot already for your deck. Regna the Redeemer, I don't think you need to play her. I think Krav is the stronger of the two, and outside of playing both of them as your commanders, I would not play Regna. She's just so much mana, and if you don't get that life gain, you're not getting the trigger. Now, the thing is if you do have that life gain, you get so many triggers out of her, right? That she'll, on each end step, she'll create a 2/2 and the 2/1/1s, and then your commander will create another 2/1/1s. That's pretty good. And you do need something like Krav out there and black mana to keep sacrificing creatures to keep gaining life, or some other life gain method. But it's really clunky. It's a lot of mana. Think about it like this. You have to play either Regna or Krav, partner for the second one, play the second one, maybe if you play them in the right order with extra mana, you can get a few tokens, and then wait an entire turn cycle to then, commit like 3 to 4 mana, I guess 4 mana for a turn cycle to get, don't get me wrong, like 8 additional tokens, but this deck is already good at that, so it feels like this is a lot of work to do this. Whereas I think if you just play Krav, you will be so much happier just to play Krav, just to use the ability and draw a bunch of cards. Finally, Myojin of Blooming Dawn is cool, but is also 8 mana and you can't cheat them into play. I don't love this. The ceiling is really high, don't get me wrong. You basically count the cards and tokens on your side of the field, double it, and then double that result with your commander. That's really impressive. But we don't have ways to do that more than once. Once the Myojin does this, the Myojin's just a 4/6, and we can't put another indestructible counter onto it. We can't bounce it back to our hand. I don't think we could reanimate it, and even if we did, I guess Takanuma's over here to do that, but even then, it's not ideal, It's just a lot of mana, and I feel like you have better finishers that will happen right away. All right, so those are the ones for creatures. Looking at our instants and sorceries, so these X spells, I don't love X spells outside of a dedicated X spell deck, because the question becomes, how much mana do you need to put into this for this to be worthwhile, right? Finale of Glory, you at least get 2/2s, and if you can get to 12 mana, you get, 10 4/4s, which is pretty lethal. But realistically, for 5 mana, you get 3 tokens. Remember, in this deck, it's not about quality, it is about quantity. So for 3, and the thing is, that's also the same for Martial Coup, to be direct. You still get only 3 tokens, right? It's not like you're getting more. But for 5 mana, you get 3 2/2s, and that's just not good enough. We can get, for 5 mana, we can get using, where is our sorcery? Lingering Souls, we can get 4 creatures over several turns, which is just better. There's a card you can discard and cast from the graveyard. So Finale of Glory and Martial Coup are cards that you don't really like to cast unless they are on that very, very like higher end of X where you can get the effect. Now Martial Coup I don't love because it destroys our commander and then we don't get the other 5 tokens or more out of it. So already I don't like that. And Finale, at least if you put 12 into it, you are going to win the game with 40 power on the board. But I will say, for what it's worth, that is 12 mana, and I don't really see you getting there often outside of Ashnod's Altar, which is a very strong card, but we don't need to play cards to make Ashnod's Altar better. So personally, I don't like these cards. Secure the Wastes is the only one that I kind of like because it can function as a fog. You can sneak them in at the end step so that nobody's ready for them. They technically have haste, and it works well with the fact that our commanders triggers on each end step. There is something about tokens that they're very predictable. Like when you have a token build, everyone knows what you're doing and how you're playing. So even just having a little bit of a surprise by putting in like once again, for 5 mana, this is 4 1/1s. This is Lingering Soul style, and then you get the 4 1/1 flyers from your commander. Now that's still not enough. I think I'd like to put in at least 6 or 7 mana into this spell because Lingering Souls otherwise is just better because those tokens have evasion. But I think it's close. So Secure the Wastes I like, the other 2 I don't like. A lot of these otherwise I do like. Increasing Devotion I also don't like. This just feels like so much mana. I guess it's 1 mana per 1/1, which isn't bad, but I don't really love that. And the 9 mana for 10 1/1s, once again, that's so much mana. I personally don't like this spell, but I understand why it's here. Let's see. Sat's Will is another one that kind of catches my eye. It's good. I guess it's good. I mean, like, I really don't feel like it's worth 5 mana if you don't have your commander out, which is a bit tricky, which makes this a pseudo 10 mana spell. But otherwise, I think in a pinch, it's fine. Using that first mode without your commander, it's not ideal, but I think you're willing to take it, so that's okay. Looking at our artifacts, we have a pretty good collection. I think Strixhaven Stadium is just a little too cute. Unless you want to make this a big part of the deck to be trying to get this and tutor for it, I really don't think I would play this card. I think it's clumsy, and then of course, yeah, it's just clumsy. It's a 3 mana rock that has extra things for you to remember, and that your opponents working together will never allow you to get this off. Now you might say, well, getting 10 hits in with 1 attack is very feasible. I think so, but like there's a lot of things that have to go right. For this to happen, you need to play this and attack with 10 creatures immediately, have them all unblocked, have no one interact with the stadium or enough of your creatures to stop you from getting to that 10. I don't know. I don't like it. It's also the kind of win con I don't enjoy, so I'm just going to say I'm being hard on it, and I'll leave it up to you to decide. Likewise, Crowded Crypt, once again, 3 mana rocks I don't love. I think Heric Banner is fine because you get the buff to your tokens, but Crowded Crypt, I've never ever seen someone flip the crypt. But I think here you might have the most reasonable way to do it because you just have a lot of creatures dying, and then flipping this for 6 mana to make, let's say, 15 to 20 2/2 decay creatures, and then getting 15 to 20 1/1 flyers. That's a pretty good deal, and I think this is the one deck I would probably be okay with it. But even then, it's still susceptible to the same kind of stuff that your deck is, so I don't particularly love it. Okay. True Conviction is the last thing I'm going to talk about before we go into additions, or my additions. And And my problem with True Conviction is that True Conviction is good with stronger creatures, and you have less ways in this current build to pump your creatures than one might expect. Like, looking at it, like, oh, I didn't even realize that you aren't playing, You aren't playing, what is it? Tokens get vigilance. How do I not know what this one is called? Intangible Virtue. I didn't even notice. I feel like that's a mistake. Intangible Virtue is such a good card in these decks, and that pump is so important. So in the current setup, I think absolutely don't play True Conviction, but depending with the cards that I add and I suggest, maybe consider it again. 1/1s with Double Strike are meaningless, right? This is a 6 mana card that just kind of rots in your hand. You play it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this doesn't really change the math that much. For 1/1s, you just add an extra point of power. Now, don't get me wrong, with 4/4s with Divine Visitation or other ways to pump these creatures, all of a sudden that is a very, very strong card. So I think I'm still going to say probably remove this, but otherwise I think we can make some changes to make it stronger. All right. So those are my main suggestions to take cards out. I have quite a few additions. Some of them are stronger than others, but I think they're worth looking into. Namely the ones that directly have to do with tokens. I feel like you're a little low on token production. So we're going to start there right after I say once again, Intangible Virtue is such a good card. You absolutely need to play it. There's a reason this has always been a tokens all-star, you know, it's just such a powerful card. Make sure to play it. All right, let's get into first token generation. The first one I'm going to say is just because it's a new one that I think is rather good, is Shadow Summoning. This is one from the Lord of the Rings set. It's 2 mana for 2 tapped 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. I like its efficiency. I like that they have flying. I like that this is an early play that you can just get out of the way to get some blockers or start getting damage through. I like that with your commander out, it's 2 mana to get 4 white spirit tokens with 2 of them tapped. These are all really good trade-offs. I think this is a very good card and an easy inclusion. Then we're going to kind of switch sides, and we're going to have a few cards here that I believe the deck does need to have because I would like some consistent token generation. You have Bitter Blossom. You should also have Skeels Hive. Once again, a 1/1 Phyrexian Might isn't ideal, but you're gonna make up for it by the fact that you also get a spirit token with your commander out. But also, Skeels Hive early game represents usually like 5 to 6 tokens. I recently rewatched the commander game that I've linked down below that I played. I think that was 10 turns. So I think 5 to 6 triggers of this is usually reasonable. Late game, unfortunately, it's not a very good card, but that is the trade-off that you're doing. These cards do a lot of work and they create a lot of bodies, and that's really what you want. It's also nice to just have tokens that do not... Sorry, my brain just stopped. That just... Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say. Anyways, the might tokens are pretty strong. The poison that they have, I don't know how relevant that's going to be, but I think it's definitely worth testing. Another one that's come out recently, actually, let's do this one before we go to the new one. Hidden Stockpile is one that also catches my eye. Now, this is an interesting one. I saw that you played Marsh Flats. I don't know at a glance if you are playing the other... No, just that's... I guess, where was it? Fabled Passage. And then, where are you? We have the... Where is it? The one that you can sacrifice to put 2 basics into play. Mirrored Landscape, yeah. So we have a few land-based things, but generally what you're going to do is you're going to let one of your tokens die. Now, what's interesting about this is that Hidden Stockpile is a 1-for-1 trade when you lose a token. You lose a 1/1, you get a 1/1. But what I like about this is that with your commander out, it allows you to actually go up on the exchange. You get 2 1/1s for every 1/1 you lose. But I like it even more with the sacrifice trigger, because, or ability, I should say, because a lot of your ways to kind of deal with board clears are to give them indestructible. But one I like here is Plumb the Forbidden. And though this isn't Plumb the Forbidden, it does aspects of it where you can start getting rid of your tokens to gain a different advantage if you were losing them anyways. So you can use Hidden Stockpile and like 3 or 4 mana to sacrifice a bunch of creatures and then scry into a particularly strong card. If you were losing those tokens, you know, why not? But when I was looking for this, I found this one after from the newest set that I like much better. This is Promise of Alkazdos, probably mispronouncing that, and Foul Rebirth. So Foul Rebirth will turn a 1/1 into any of your tokens into a 4/3, but the enchantment itself says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a non-demon creature. If you do, populate. Now, what's really interesting is both sides of this are just like Hidden Stockpile, where they are a 1-for-1 trade in theory. But this promise is really, really good because 4/3, the vampire demons are much stronger than 1/1s. They both have flying. But in addition, when you start populating the 4/3 demon. So you are getting the better exchange every time you do this. And then, once again, when you get that trade-off being at the end of your turn, you count the tokens you made, you go up on the exchange because you get a 1/1 back from your commander at least every time you do this. So for me, it's like a lot of these things are like they're small points here and there, but I think they add up rather quickly. Then something else I was thinking looking at these is there was 2 battles that I thought were really, really interesting here. The first one's Invasion of Innistrad. This one's the weaker of the 2. It's very easily just a removal spell for 4 mana. It gets through Indestructible, which is nice, but -13. And then the main reason I'm thinking of the battles is they're really easy for you to break through. Once you break through the siege, you get Deluge of the Dead, which comes in with 2/2 zombies, and then for 2 and a black, you can get exile a creature from a graveyard, and you get a 2/2 zombie. Now, I don't know how much you're going to use that activated ability, but if you use this as a removal and then take them out, take out the siege in 1 or 2 attacks, getting 2 more zombies, that's just 2 more tokens to get out of your deck, to get out of your commander if your commander's out at the same time. I do particularly like this. It's fine, but I think it's a neat kind of addition. But this one's much stronger, which is Invasion of Toada. This one, when it comes into the battlefield, you basically reanimate any card from your graveyard to the battlefield, which I really, really like, because it just has to be not a battle, so there's a lot of things you can pull out. But on the other side, your tokens get +1/+0, and then each end step, you get a flying spirit, which is really, really, really cool. I like this very, very straightforwardly as a really strong card on both ends, and it's easy, I believe. Defense is 5, so it's easy for you to break through, and then when you do, you're immediately benefiting with both a buff and token generation, both for free. Likewise, when we talk about token generation and a buff, we have Ethereal Absolution. I think this is absolutely a card that you should be playing. This has like half of Elsh Norn attached to it, where you get +1/+1 and -1/-1 for your opponents. And then for 4 mana, much like the zombie siege, you are getting a 1/1 flying spirit for exiling a creature. I don't think, once again, the activated ability is not ideal, but if you're in a situation where you have extra mana, it is tokens. But that first half of buffing your tokens and taking that same amount away from your opponents is really, really strong. I really do think this is a powerful card that you could be adding, especially in comparison to some of your other 6-drops, which I think are lacking the power this would bring. One more card, because I was on token generation, I was a bit hard on the X spells, but Grand Crescendo, I see it's $5, maybe it's earned that price. But Grand Crescendo, I think, is the strongest version of this card that I've seen, namely because it always has the clause that you can just pay white and X equals 0 to give your creatures indestructible against a board clear. So I feel like this and Secure the Wastes are the ones you should keep. This being instant obviously is very, very good. This being, if you have the mana, you can just dump a bunch of mana into this in response to a board clear or not in response to a board clear, right? This can work as a fog as well to create a bunch of tokens, but then those tokens survive combat. This just has a lot of utility that I think is really, really good. And so for me, this one beats out all of the other X token creation spells by a wide margin. So this would be the one I would recommend that you play. And then we have, I think at least one of these probably generates, yeah, 2 of these generate tokens, but here's like a handful of cards that I think are just strong that could help support some of the problems or the deck in general ways. The easiest one with mana production is Dark Ritual. You're in black. You kind of just get to play Dark Ritual. Now, you aren't powering out an exceedingly broken card with this, but at the same time, you are able to like pull out your commander early. You are able to push out some of those mid-level cards that are really strong a bit earlier. You can use this to pull out one of your like Smothering Tithe earlier in the game. I've definitely done that. And all of these, all in all, this just makes it a very, very strong card. So I almost universally advocate for Dark Ritual in black decks, especially black decks that want to hit higher mana costs. So I think this is a pretty good inclusion here. Then you said no aristocrats, but Corpse Knight kind of works in a different way. I think it's something worth considering. Corpse Knight says whenever creatures enter play in your control, each opponent loses 1 life. This is particularly strong, especially with the number of tokens that you're putting out there, but it is non-combat damage, so I'll leave this up to you to decide exactly if you like it or not, but it can be a very, very powerful inclusion. Something that I think definitely needs to be in there is Mentor of the Meek. Mentor of the Meek is always, always strong in token decks because it represents quite a bit of card draw. Albeit for 1 mana each time, but still that's quite a bit of card draw. Having this on the back burner and having a few tokens, enter the battlefield without mana costs, such as the Skeels Hive or your commander's ability, allows you to turn those tokens immediately into cards, 1 mana for a card. And I think that's rather, rather good and an easy inclusion. But if you're looking for another form of card draw, Rowan's Grim Search I prefer much higher than Pointed Discussion. One, it is an instant spell, but also the bargain is very accessible to you to sacrifice a token because you are a token deck. And then at that point, it represents a very, very good card where you basically scry 4, or I guess surveil 4, almost, not entirely. Actually, it might just be surveil 4. Look at the top 4, put 2 of them back on top. Oh, because you have a limit. So it's not surveil 4, but it's close. It's close enough that I think it's worth considering it that way. And then you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. I think overall is just a very, very good card in your deck, and I think you should be playing it for sure. This is a card that I need to continue picking up copies for because I think this is the kind of card that I will be playing in a lot of decks moving forward if it proves its strength. All right, I've got 4 more cards, and these are kind of, 3 of them are finishers, and 1 is just something to think about. Ria Ivore, Bane of Bladehold. Feels like it really does belong here. She is both token generation and token buff. If you ever were thinking of a side commander to play on this deck, Ria would do a pretty good job in this deck as an alternative commander. She's really, really strong. And it's important to remember that she doesn't blank a full attack. I don't know why I and other people keep thinking that, you blank an entire attack and you get a bunch of mites. But she actually blanks 1 creature. So you attack with her, you pick a creature, and that creature's damage turns into mites. And that's just really, really good because 1, obviously it works very well with your commander's token doubling strategy. But also, I think it's a very good political play because you could talk to an opponent and say, hey, I'll attack you with this, but I'll turn it into mites. Are you okay with, will you let it through if that's the case? Now, they won't always say yes. At a certain point, your opponents will get smart enough to say no, but a few attacks might be more possible when you do that. And this isn't even including the fact that, you know, attacking with Ria Ivore and all of a sudden your 1/1 flyers become 2/1s, allowing them to attack, deal more damage, or the fact that she doesn't even need to attack. You just let a spirit through, you know, on the turn you play this, and if it's just a 1/1, that's fine. You will just get 1 might out of it, and that's a fine deal. Remember, this token, I feel like something that's important for this deck that the deck is missing is that I want to be generating tokens every turn a little bit, and preferably paying no mana for it. And things like Ria Ivore is really, really good in that direction. All right, let's look at finishers. Cathar's Crusade is one I always suggest, but I'll leave that up to you. And the reason I don't easily suggest it is that it is a math nightmare. If you aren't playing on MTGO, this card is so annoying to resolve, but very quickly does win you the game. Cathar's Crusade on the battlefield and having like 10 spirits and then going to your turn and summoning, I don't know, like 4 or 5 is usually lethal against at least 2 of your opponents. That's not even including the ridiculousness of like having Cathar's Crusade and having summoned 1 or 2 spirits and then just going to end step and getting 2 more is already just ridiculous when you think about how many counters are going across everything. It's very, very strong. It's just a math nightmare. And in fact, if you were going to put this in, I would tell you straight up just to take Divine Visitation out. They kind of occupy the same slot, but Cathar's Crusade is just stronger in my mind, even though you know, the angels are 4/4s and they come with flying. I really like it more for them just to grow with +1/+1 counters. Your spirits already have evasion. We don't need any more of that. Also, I'm suggesting to take that out because the other one that I think goes well with it, kind of competes with it again, is Harmonious Archon. Harmonious Archon makes all non-Archon creatures have 3/3 base power and toughness, and then you get 2 1/1s. So there is token generation attached to the Archon, but it does immediately buff all of your tokens into stronger creatures. And what I think is also really good about this is that it does also weaken your opponent's creatures usually. Other token decks will be pretty happy when you play this, but then you have an ally for a little bit. I do think this is a really strong card. It can be clunky. There's certain boards you'll play this and it's not going to do anything, but when it does work, it does it really, really well. For most cards, you can imagine this is a clean +2/+2. And something that's really worth noting is when you have a bunch of 3/3s and your opponents have a bunch of 3/3s, let me find that card. Ethereal Absolution becomes incredibly powerful. All of a sudden you get 4/4s and they get 2/2s, which means they have to trade 2 creatures for 1 creature every single time. But you might be noticing something. This gives -1/-1, making their creatures 2/2s. If only there was something that would finish that off with, let's say, a -2/-2. That's right, you saw it coming. It is Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite. This is a card I will always suggest in most white decks as a very, very clean finisher. People, I think, to this day underestimate how powerful that constant -2/-2 across the board is. It is insanely powerful. You will take out entire boards of tokens on your opponent's side. You will pressure a lot of very strong creatures. The ones I always talk about, think Dark Confidant, think Thalia, think Collector Oof. I don't know why that one came to mind. But a lot of really strong creatures have low power toughness, and then a lot of commanders are 2/2s, especially creatures that fly. This will clean them up really, really nicely. She is so strong, and honestly, over the years, has really dropped in price. This card used to be, I think, $40 at a certain point, and I am glad it's no longer the case. I still have the original printing because that's what I got, but there's so many good arts. I actually don't like these as much, but I'm sure they're accessible. Where are they at? $10. Yeah, they're all pretty much $10. So find a copy of Elshnorn that you like. I think it is a very, very good inclusion. And that's kind of where I'm going to end this video. I think the deck is not in a bad place by itself. It's just being pulled into a lot of directions. And the direction that's a little confusing to me that's lacking was a lot of token generation. So that's why a lot of my additions are token generation, and especially passive token generation. Your deck is the one that goes from 0 to 100 incredibly fast. Now, as I said before, token decks are telegraphed. Everyone knows what you're doing. But with Thalisse on the front end, you know, all of a sudden you can go from, you know, 10 tokens to 30 or 40 tokens over like one instant speed token generation spell, right? And that's where the power of this deck lies. But in the meantime, having just the general token generation so that you can just leave them out and plan out your next few turns, I think will be a big boon for you. All right. I hope this video was helpful to you. I hope that if you are going to create another draft of the deck, you'll send it my way. And if you want to send that draft or a draft of any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you would like that deck list you sent to me to be the next one I work on, there's a link for that in the description below as well. As always, if you could like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thing, I'd be incredibly grateful. The channel is still growing, and I would hope to hit that 500 subscribers soon. I really do think we can do it. All right. Thank you for the deck, Macy, and good luck.